And both John and Julie were very willing to jump on this, and I appreciate that participation. I've known John for probably 20 years, and off and on. I think I actually probably met John when he was first working at Quinn Evans, and then he was already very committed to sustainability, and he wanted to be able to speak that message to more people. In his background, he was a building performance facilitator. He had an unconventional journey, and that's pretty much how I put it to John. Share with us your journey. He may not speak about it, but he lives in a house in Water Hill that is not in a designated historic district, but that doesn't have to be designated to be of important historic character, and he is on the Historic District Commission, so he could certainly speak to how those regulations are imposed on homeowners in historic districts, and the flexibility that we should be thinking about in making our properties more energy efficient and sustainable. So John earned a Master of Architecture degree and Master's in Engineering. He's a licensed architect, and he has served as Green Mystic in Residence. So that's kind of how it happened. I said, John, talk about your journey. But he guides other teams into doing the right thing, where you're designing and building projects, and as part of the process to create a new vision, whether it's simple certification or fully integrated regenerative renovation. And I am not sure what John is going to tell us tonight, but we'll start with John, and then I'll move into a brief segue into what Julie will share with us and her role at the city. So John, you want to take it away?
Sure.
Or do you have, do you need to ask Jeff to give
Yes,
you
I need
sharing?
to get share privileges, but I
It is on. Sharing is on.
I will start and see what goes on here. I'm expecting that you could see my screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
And then let me move this little window out of the way so I can change it into a slideshow. And then move this window out of the way again. There we go. Yeah, so I live in a house on Hiscock Street in Water Hill. It is the 1917 Kleinschmidt house, and it actually won a preservation award, I think in 2009, I think. Yep. So this is kind of a short presentation about environmental issues, and at the same time, a little bit of preservation and a lot of environmental aspects of what you can do in your own home. So I, as you know, I worked with Eileen a while back at Quinn Evans. Really super enjoyed that time and that exposure. Now I kind of classify myself as a green mystic in residence, which means I really help project teams kind of navigate what green means to them and how do they hit those performance goals for their own buildings. Several times we'll work on residential projects, and most of the time we'll work on large commercial projects and institutional projects. I consider myself a recovering architect. Although I do practice a lot of architecture still, nonetheless, in the work that I do with project teams in terms of drawing reviews. And I work a lot on building envelope commissioning, which is now a very specialized field in the realm of making sure that buildings are not falling apart the second they get built. And it kind of takes a lot of the work that I did with Eileen, which is a lot of early kind of historic forensic work where you're trying to figure out what's going on, why is the building failing here, and really getting a better idea of how flashings work and compatibility with materials. So it works really well into what I've done in the past and where I'm going with it. So I would say, the work I did on this house started about 18 years ago. And ever since then, it's been kind of like everyone, it's a journey. And how does one get started? In some ways, I would say what individuals or even yourselves as citizens of Ann Arbor can do to get started and helping our community. It really has to do with the challenges that we're kind of facing. And our government, our localized government, has already identified some of these challenges and have tried to hit targets to say, okay, here's how we can start addressing these challenges. While at the same time, our federal government is finally turning towards this as well. And so it's kind of a happy time to be re-engaged in this community. So I've always shown this in reference to home ownership. I think a lot of you have probably already seen this quote before, but what's the use of a fine house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? And the climax of our current geological time frame, which you may have heard has been affectionately called the Anthropocene epoch. That is the geological epoch that began when human activities had a significant global impact on Earth's ecosystems. The climate of this epoch has been really characterized by the stewardship and the species stewardship of the natural world. And it's stewardship that's always been kind of a term that's been reversely coined from sustainability, kind of showing the kind of moral aspect to it that human beings as a species should be really gearing themselves towards. Because based on our current direction, it's not really presenting a positive outlook for our species and for many other species that we cohabitate with the planet with. So this is, of course, what I'm speaking towards in terms of man-made global climate impacts. This is a map that kind of shows the potential effects of human activity that shouldn't be ignored or forgotten. This shows kind of the sources of pollution across the planet. And while we do know that there are high levels of pollution in certain areas, there's also other effects that we tend to forget. We all kind of affectionately remember the Exxon Valdez. That was a big thing when I was growing up, and I remember hearing about that, and that kind of helped kind of place a little bit of the impact that human beings can have. And it was disastrous, and we could see it. It was really widespread, and we could see it, right? It was right in our face, and it really shocked a lot of us. And around the same time, though, from a 10-year period from 1986 to 96, about 10 times the amount of oil was spilled in the Niger River Delta, 10 times. So while the Exxon Valdez was about 257,000 barrels of oil, 2.57 million barrels were spilled in the Niger River Delta. So what was relatively concentrated and cleanable on water versus what is really dispersed and nearly impossible to clean up, spread out across the Delta. And it's an area that we just don't really think about in our impacts as we're kind of navigating through our lives. And so humans have had and still have a really broad reaching impact on the entire world around us. So when I got this house, it was still what to do, where do I start, how do I start attacking this, and how do I look at being more impactful? And sure, we can focus on things that we know that we can do, like certainly purchasing less stuff, or trying to change or modify the way that we get ourselves around from point A to point B, making sure that we're looking at our transportation habits in a different context. And that's all good and super impactful, but we're constantly overlooking an area that we have a lot of potential, and there's so much that we can do. And that's in buildings. Buildings fundamentally impact people's lives and the health of the planet. In the US, buildings use 1/3 of the total energy, 2/3 of our electricity, 1/8 of our water, and transform land that provides valuable ecological services. Atmospheric emissions from the use of energy leads to acid rain. We know that it affects ground level ozone, smog, and global climate change. And buildings consume basically more of everything. They account for more than 39% of the US primary energy use, including transportation, more than transportation. And the impacts are not just limited to stuff. You know, this kind of graph is something that USGBC talks about, the United States Green Building Council. But it's more than just stuff. You know, we focus a lot by what Carl Elefante is really big on, and that is a term coined by him, and that is, you know, what is the greenest building? If you really want to be the greenest thing you can be, the greenest building is the one that's already built. And this is an area where we understand that existing buildings outnumber new buildings in the US 100 to 1. And it certainly has a lot to do with where you hit that cutoff. And there's lots of amazing research out there that just talks about what the existing building stock is, how they're all generationally impacted based on how we want to kind of classify their energy use. And it'll shock you. Most people think that really old buildings are energy hogs, and that's not always the case. Buildings built before 1940 are not necessarily energy hogs. They manage things very differently. And with the advent of HVAC, it changed drastically the energy profile of buildings. So here's my house. This is when I bought it. This is what it looked like. And we kind of think of environmental issues as well as things to do with your house as to why do this? There's an obvious environmental and moral imperative that I really took on, but to me, it also took on a question of simple math. I wanted to make more of what was going into and was already in my building, from its energy, from its water, from its building materials, its furniture, its finishes, its natural light, its air. All these things became simple math to me. I'm part engineer, so I kind of think in those terms. And to me, once I bought this house, to me, I was the steward of those materials. I was a steward of this house so that I can continue it for the next 100 years. I knew that when I bought the house in 2002, it was going to be 100 years in 2017. I didn't think I would still be in Michigan still, but here I am. And 100 years came on this house, and it just became kind of a proud moment for all of us in the family to know that we've been the stewards of this house for a 20-year period in its life. 1/5 of its life, and we are propelling it to be around for the next 100 years easily by doing the things that we are doing. So with every good plan, you have to start kind of a to-do list. And here's a to-do list that I strongly recommend by anybody who has a house or has a building and they want to kind of just figure out what to do. And of course, a to-do list always has a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and 5, 6. But all that being said, there are a few things that are fundamental to your process and your journey. And I'll come back to the list. And that is, the process and the journey is going to drive you nuts. In fact, environmental issues and the whole concept of trying to be green is really not cut and dry. The picture is extremely complicated. And the best attitude is to take on kind of the most informed, best decision that one can take at a particular moment. If you kind of wrap your head around these little environmental issues, you will see that you're opening Pandora's box of complexity. And sometimes that complexity is important, but you're trying to look at the overall picture and make decisions on that overall picture. So I tried to make decisions based on an isolation of best practices at the time, and tried to move forward based on terms that I used: durability, maintainability, adaptability, embodied energy, and life cycle assessment. So it may drive you nuts, but at the same time, reality is going to hit you in the face pretty hard. There is a preferred order to approach the work on your existing structure or your home, but there's also a reality. And the reality is that, oh, this window just broke, or the hot water tank just stopped working, or the front door is cracked wide open. Those are there might be a basic priority list from which to start, but this is developed from my experience working in my house. And I completely understand that sometimes reality is going to hit you in the face and you got to work on other things, because it happened to me. So I identified that to-do list as kind of a redesign priority list. Like, how do you redesign what you're doing and kind of pull from the to-do list? So here we go. So one of the first steps we tried to look at was keeping the heat in and the cold temperature out in winter. Pretty easy. In other words, we wanted to tune the envelope of the existing house, the envelope being the portion of the building that separates the interior and the exterior. So here's me starting to work on my house. I started taking down all the asbestos tile siding. I stacked it up. And then I looked underneath and went, oh, what's going on under here? Oh, look, there's some existing poplar siding. This stuff's in decent shape. Well, what's underneath there? It just kept going and going all the way down to the sheathing. And I would take all that wood and I stockpiled it all in the garage. And then board by board, I stripped all the paint off and started working on the house and tuning the envelope. I wrapped it in an air barrier material. And this was still very early in the building science aspects of air barriers and rain screens. I got a lot of grief with the building department because they didn't understand why I was holding the siding off the building and not attaching it directly to the building. And I was doing an air gap behind it. Now this is all standard practice, but at the time it definitely was not. And had I done this all over again, I added a 1/4 inch of foam. I think if I did this all over again, I would have added like an inch, inch and a half, maybe even 3 inches if I could have. Just adding that insulation on the outside of the home would have made a significant difference to its overall performance. But overall, I stripped all this stuff down. I primed all the boards, back primed all the boards, put them all back up, and then continued to focus on tuning my envelope. And tuning the envelope also included kind of looking at doing thermal scans. You can get some of these from the library, even though you'll be on a waiting list forever, and most likely you'll be able to pick it up in the middle of summer. When you think you might need it in winter, but you can actually use the thermal scan in the middle of summer, especially if your house is pretty cool and you keep it pretty cool. My house, I don't have any air conditioning, but I still managed to keep it pretty cool, especially with all this insulation. and how I kind of managed a lot of the energy gaps and looking at tuning the thermal envelope. That helped me really avoid a huge energy expense and CO2 expense, which is air conditioning. We're the only country in the world, by the way, that actually uses more energy in the summer than in the winter. So think about that. I took out all the windows of the house and I reglazed them all myself. This is before Lori Sipes taught me how to do some of it. She helped me kind of in the later stages of it. And she and I also got stuck on the weight pockets, on what to do with these weight pockets. Because I was just like, well, there's still such an air infiltration area. I don't know how to fix that. And she's like, well, you could just take the weight pockets out. And I'm like, no way, I'm going to keep the weights in there. And she's like, yeah, I agree. I like the windows with the weights. And how do you manage the weather stripping? I was able to put in new weather stripping. And then when I got to the actual weight pockets, you could see this on the left side. I started actually filling them with pieces of foam, thin pieces of foam. And then I spray foam them just to make an insulated weight pocket. And that seemed like a decent idea at the time, but then it also restricted the movement of the weights. So I actually, which I don't have a photo of, I ended up using paper tubes. I got a bunch of paper tubes that were the same width as the weight well, or the weight that goes up and down. And I shoved those two paper tubes with the weight in it. And then I spray foamed around it. And that actually created a nice little channel for them to travel up and down, and at the same time provide a super insulated weight cavity. So the portion of this part of my house, this window, is actually better insulated than the portions out here that has cellulose, surprisingly. So that's kind of the tune the envelope part. You could tell that the thermal scan was pretty revealing at the time too. You could see here on the left, we did a thermal scan of the basement, and it was just a huge energy area. It's estimated by the EPA that almost 20% of your energy comes out of your basement walls, right where the rim joist meets the foundation wall. And mine was certainly losing a lot of its heat in that direction. I also found areas of the cavities where a lot of the insulation had just fallen. It just settled down. So I was able to go in, and of course I didn't do it in the right order. It would have been better to do this from the outside and then put the siding back up, but I actually did it from the inside. So I had to cut holes in the plaster and then patch those holes. I've gotten pretty good at doing plaster work. So that's more of tuning the envelope. Then after that, we kind of upgrade the energy hogs. And this is kind of my second redesign priority, is how to manage those energy hogs. And a lot of it has to do with finding the sources of big energy uses and just upgrading them, especially with old houses. A lot of times you'll look at something and go, oh, well, that's only 20 years old. But its energy profile for 20 years old actually might be very drastic. Something like a boiler from 2000 and a boiler now, the efficiencies have changed drastically in those 20 years. And it is probably much worthwhile when you look at the full life cycle to replace those boilers. So it also meant not just tuning the envelope, but also tuning the energy consumption of any devices and really thinking about their impacts. So for my house, this actually came first out of necessity. About a year, no, less than a year, 6 months of moving into the house, the furnace stopped working. And the hot water heater was showing signs of stopping. So this was in the middle of March, and I was thinking about replacing the mechanical system. And I said, okay, well, I gotta think about the mechanical system, and I want to do that, but I really have to think about foresight and where am I going with this mechanical system? Because my goal in the end was to try and make sure that this house was going to be net zero or net positive in terms of its energy contribution to the community. So I had to really kind of think about what system was going to be easy to put in, easy to replace, and also plug into the existing systems with minimal impact. Since I had a forced air system, that certainly makes it kind of tricky to be overly effective and efficient. So I actually moved everything to a water-based system. And here you can see I used a tank, a double-walled tank that has two exchangers, an exchanger on the top and an exchanger on the bottom. It has a backup system, which is basically a boiler, but it's actually a flash hot water heater. And that flash hot water heats the tank to a certain temperature. And I'm in the middle of installing the solar thermal panels on the back of the house, which I did not throw a photo in here of, but Missy Stoltz is actually helping me on that because there are certainly some zoning issues affiliated with trying to do the right thing that kind of limit your ability to do some of this solar stuff. Not just zoning issues, but just like historic district issues as well. And some of those historic district things are a lot to do. Well, let me get to that in a second. Other things I did with the mechanical system was that I put in an air handling unit, which was a water-based air handling unit. This is what the system looks like. It has a built-in HRV, which is a heat recovery ventilator. So as I'm tightening the envelope and building it tighter, I need to make sure that I'm still bringing in fresh air. Right now, our houses are pretty leaky, and we keep using that phrase of, oh, what needs to breathe? Well, that it needs to breathe is also very energy inefficient. And that it needs to breathe does bring in fresh air for you in an inadvertent way, but at the same time, it uses a ton of energy to try and heat and cool that space and really affects your thermal comfort. So as you're tightening your envelope, you need to make sure that you're bringing in the right amount of fresh air. We installed this fairly early in the process, and I must say it made a very significant impact in our overall indoor air quality. You could feel it during allergy season. You could feel it during the middle of winter. It helped level a lot of things. And I also tore out the basement floor and made it a radiant floor, water-based radiant floor. And that really helped moderate the house temperature. I can set the radiant floor on temperatures like today that are like a high of 50, and the house air handling unit won't turn on. It'll keep the house up in the 60s to 70s pretty easily without even turning the heat on. So the other target was on the list was harnessing the free energy. And this is kind of the last kind of redesign priority, is how to harvest that energy. And a lot of the free energy in our area is solar. We have the sky conditions that are relatively conducive. Sure, we're not Arizona, we're not Florida, but we're not as bad as you think. You could definitely harness a decent amount of energy in this area to generate as much electricity as you consume in your house, which is what my house currently does. And here's a snapshot. I take it every year of the day that I start moving over into a net positive relationship with DTE. I call it a net positive relationship with DTE. So most of the time I'm struggling with DTE where I'm always in the green on this, where I'm consuming more energy throughout the day than I'm producing. And you can see that it flip-flops just right in the end of February, it begins to flip-flop where I'm generating more every day than I'm consuming. Particularly on beautiful sunny days. So despite kind of a negative attitude towards renewables and their payback, I see much more of the work that I did. Most people are like, well, what is your ROI on these solar panels? And I'm like, well, it's not great, particularly at the time that I bought solar almost 10 years ago. The cost was about $7 per watt. And now it's half that. It's even, it's amazing how right now is key. And this is what Julie's probably going to talk about as well. So it's pretty crazy to see the transformation in this, and it's exciting to see it. So I'll kind of summarize again the to-do list. If you have a chance to start with an energy audit and getting a thermal scan, by all means, try and do it and get a really good sense from DTE of how you use your energy and where the energy use comes up the most. I determined a few ROIs, basically looking at my windows, because again, at the time, 20 years ago, that's what everyone thought was your biggest ROI, was replacing your windows. And my research definitively found that replacing your windows is the worst way to adjust an ROI. that refurbishing your windows is by far a much more effective way of lowering your ROI and reaping rewards that are unimaginable to the resources in those windows. Those old growth windows will outlast any fiberglass or vinyl window because you can repair them. You can repair them and fix them and make them the same that they were when they were originally installed. Versus a vinyl window, the second a seal breaks, you got to replace the whole thing. The third step, again, I mentioned turning the envelope. The fourth is looking at upgrading those energy hogs and certainly harnessing the free energy. And basically the work that I did came in those cycles. And each time I did those cycles, I was making improvements. And stewardship came in kind of different shapes and forms. So don't overlook the buildings that we already have and where you can start with the ones that you have right in front of you. So once I was able to kind of do that, I was able to kind of look at more of the fun stuff that architects like to do, which is like finishing out a basement, right? And this is what my basement looks like. It's a phenomenal space in a historic home. It's kind of weird to see when you look at the rest of the house, which is like this beautiful craftsman with plaster walls. The basement was your typical Michigan basement. It looked pretty dank with a random toilet in the corner that had no doors. That was your, typical thing when I moved into the house, and I renovated it to this. Spent a lot of time working and developing kind of cool spaces within your house. And this is what the outside of the house looks like now too. Got the solar panels up. We took down the big pine trees. The pine trees are blocking a lot of the sun, and just generally cooling the house in the winter, which we didn't want. So we put a catalpa up front. And the catalpa has, big thick trunks, and when it loses its leaves, it's fairly spindly in the winter. So that's kind of my journey on what we did for our house. And as I mentioned, it did get a historic preservation award, even with the addition I put on the back. And that doesn't show up much in the photo, but I'm standing in the addition right now. It's a pretty small addition. But here's my contact info. And I tried to make some cookies once and put them in a cookie jar, and I made the cookies too big. So I had to eat them all at once.
Thank you, John. That's
Sure.
terrific. I think what you've shown is that it's a very personal journey. You became the steward. Once you recognized that you were the steward of the property, you let the property tell you what you really could accomplish and do the right thing. And I think you approached it very logically and methodically, and you've ended up after 20 years with something to be really proud of. And everyone has their own journey.
Yes,
So
definitely.
let's hold the questions if we can until after we've heard from Julie. And we can all share a little bit of our own journey, but we can certainly try to relate to these choices that John made. Julie, I will just introduce briefly. Now, Julie works in the Office of Sustainability, so with Missy Stoltz, and on the innovations at the City of Ann Arbor, sustainability and innovations at the City of Ann Arbor. She runs what is called the Solarize program, bulk buy program, working on program planning around electrification and efficiency. And she is helping to develop a low-income solar access program. So I know that there are many projects. There's been these bulk buy. We can explain that. You'll go into the detail. I've talked to a couple of people who have participated in it and are recruiting additional people to join in. So I think that's something I'm curious about, and maybe other people want to hear about as well.
Thanks,
Okay.
thanks, Eileen. Yeah, I could talk for hours, but I'm just going to try and not do that to you. There's so much going on and there's so much to say. And I have to say, John, that the cookies at the end that didn't fit in the jar is the best ending to a presentation I have ever seen. That was that win. What was that? That was the quirkiest little. Anyway,
to me, it represents how to work on your house.
Yeah.
It's just like, didn't work as planned.
A lot of things, actually, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Let's see if I can share my screen here. This is really good because it segues quite a bit into a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about. And I wanted to segue after listening to John and his journey. I want to tell you a little bit about what the city's doing, because it really parallels a lot of what John's doing, and it's trying to make it easier. John was like the early adopter vanguard here, and not everyone is going to hand by hand, remove each board from the outside of their house. I mean, more power to you if you are. And yet we need to, as John was talking about, climate change, and I love that quote from Thoreau, which I had not seen. We don't have any more time. Basically, we don't have time to sort of really sort of slowly consider this and make a 30-year plan for our homes. It's just we won't get there. So we're trying to make this scalable. We're trying to make it easier. We're trying to make it more accessible for a lot of people. It's hard. The city can be an influencer in a lot of these spaces, but the city can't mandate things. The city can't, do it on their own. The city has control over their municipal operations, but not the general public. So anyway, having said all of that, I am going to run through some of this because I think most of you know all about 820. I can't see your faces, but just 30 seconds. We know that we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of 820 being formally adopted by City Council. So that'll be June 1st, basically. So that first week of June 1st through the 6th or 7th, we're having 820 week. You can go on our website and check it out. Let me go to the actual slideshow. You can go to the website and check it out. We're doing all kinds of things and so much learning happening that week, and fun is happening. Scavenger hunts and green fair with farm to table food, and there's learning opportunities around solar. There's going to be a mural unveiling. There's award ceremonies. There's all kinds of really fun and interesting things. A day of service if you're interested in participating in. So you can check that on the website. But basically, 820 has a goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. We're now bickering about, like, does that mean the end of 2030? Can we at least have till the end of 2030? Because we have so much to do. And every time we do our metrics, we think, well, yeah, we can do it. So anyway, this is our carbon emissions over time from 2000 till around now, and they've been reducing in Ann Arbor. There have been improvements made, and that's despite population growth. So that's good. But you can see the curve has to drop pretty precipitously at this point in order to meet our goals. A little emissions snapshot. We know that about 1/3 of carbon emissions come from U of M. And we also know that they have now released their own carbon neutrality plan. We know about 23% come from the residential sector, that's our homes, and 22% from commercial and industrial, and about 17% from transportation. So that's just kind of giving you an idea of where all of this stuff is coming from. And the 820 plan has basically 6 overarching strategies. One, we got to get our electrical grid powered with 100% renewable energy. If we don't have that, then we can't get there. So that's a whole nother topic of conversation, is how that's happening. We have to switch our appliances and our vehicles from fossil fuels to clean electricity. And I can't remember exactly the percentage that was, modeled into the targets, but it's a lot. it's a lot. And then we have to improve our energy. Well, I think maybe people could mute if you're not muted. And then we clearly have to deal with energy efficiency. We can't, if we're going to be electrifying everything that is currently burning fossil fuels and then plugging it into a grid, that is going to tax the grid considerably. So using less, right? Improving energy efficiency dramatically. And then we have to reduce the miles we travel in our vehicles. We have to change the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials, bringing it into a more circular economy. And we have to enhance the resilience of our people in place, because climate change is already here and it's going to get worse, regardless of whether we meet our goals. It's just a matter of how much worse. So we have to make sure that we're prepared as best that we can. Just to go back for a second, this first one, powering our electrical grid with 100% renewable energy. The strategy in 820 is that we build as much renewable energy right here in our footprint as possible. And in Ann Arbor, that's solar. It's not really wind. We don't have the space and the wind for wind, but we have a lot of space for solar. We have all this built environment. And so the goal is to build as much as we possibly can within our footprint, both on our municipal buildings, our commercial and industrial buildings, our residential buildings, and landfill, and hopefully community solar. And then whatever we can't build here, we procure on our grid. So we have a problem with our buildings. We know they account for 20% of our community-wide emissions. And we have a solution. It's not complicated. I mean, it is, but it isn't, right? We know the solution. The solution is we electrify everything, stop burning gas, fracked gas in our buildings. We get all of our electricity from renewable clean energy instead of coal and burnt gas. And we do deep efficiency work. So we're using much, much less. So that's it. I could end there. Just go do that. Energy efficiency, I'll overlap a little bit here with John. The least problematic energy for our environment is the energy we have never used. So as I mentioned before, as we electrify everything, the demand on our grid is going to be greater and greater. And we're going to need more and more renewables. So let's really take a look at what we're using. There we go. So energy audits. I can't speak highly enough about energy audits. They can range in cost. They're a few $100s. I think it's a really powerful few $100s spent. You can get a pretty deep look at how your home is performing, the envelope of your home, and where your money is going to be best spent. There are differences in energy auditors. So some energy auditors come into your home and audit it, but they're also selling the services to do work that they say you need, right? So they say you need weather sealing and they do the weather sealing, and they say you need insulation and they do the insulation. My own bias is I wanted to have an energy audit by an independent auditor who is not selling anything, who was just going to be very thorough and tell me exactly what I needed, and then tell me who he would recommend to do the work. He also, the auditor I hired, will come back within the year after the work is done and recheck it. But he was very, very thorough, and he found all kinds of interesting places where my house was just leaking and not sealing well that I never would have anticipated. And I'm really excited. I'm about to get his report and telling me all the things I can do. I might be the only person on the planet excited about an energy audit. I don't know. I think they need a rebranding, because who wants an audit? I just think, who decided they should be auditors? They need to find someone in PR. Anyway.
They should call it like an energy party.
Yeah, an energy party. That's what we're gonna have. I mean, who wants to be audited?
I
That
know,
sounds
just make it sound like
expensive.
fun.
No.
Call it an energy Mardi Gras or something.
There you go. All right, old Fourth Ward, you guys crowdsource this and come up with some sort of rebranding for this. Anyway, comprehensive assessment, energy assessment, that's boring. Depending on the auditor, they may also, if it's within your goals, can include their opinions about and in their assessment if you want to go to electrification away from gas. It depends on the auditor. And they do a lot of health and safety checks. They look at your gas lines and they measure for gas leaks, and it is alarming how many they find in all kinds of places. And then last thing about audits is that if you are going to transition or consider transitioning to a heat pump, my bias is an energy audit is a must prior to doing that. And that is because when we think of gas furnaces, most of us have gas furnaces that are oversized for our buildings and therefore not very efficient compared to what they could be, but they're hot gas furnaces, so they can really kind of cover up a lot of deficits in your home. Like, you can feel pretty comfortable just blasting the gas furnace, even though you're heating the birds as well. Whereas a heat pump works differently. It works better if you just set it to a comfortable temperature and kind of leave it alone, and you don't bring it up and down all the time. It doesn't burn as hot, but it keeps your temperature in your home very comfortable, unless it's really leaky home. And then you're going to have more trouble with comfort. So this is one of those A and then B things as far as I'm concerned. I think John already showed you this. This is a blower door test. And you can really see where you're losing energy. And it's not just at these like walls and places. You can see where, oh, look, right there is no insulation right there. Like, why? I don't know. There's just no insulation there. Or the previous owner put can lights all over the first floor, and they just bright blue so they have to be replaced with a different kind of fixture. Plumbing under sinks where you can actually feel wind when the blower door test is going. So that was very interesting for me. Now, moving on to building electrification, because this is something we don't talk about a lot. We talk about efficiency and we talk about solar, because solar is sexy and everyone wants to talk about solar. But building electrification is really important. And some of the science and research that's coming out right now is alarming and not well known. So when we think about emissions, usually we think about the emissions that are coming from power plants, right? There's a power plant, there's a coal plant, there's a gas plant somewhere. It's burning emissions and producing electricity that flows through the grid into your home. But we're not often thinking about fuels in our homes, right? We are burning gas, and gas is a fossil fuel. It needs to be renamed as well, like the energy audit. It is not natural gas, it is fracked gas or fossil gas. It is bad. It is almost worse than carbon because it produces methane into the environment, which is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon. So your building is like its own little power plant. It's producing its own direct emissions, and nobody can do anything about that except you. So when you think about this, if we got the whole grid to 100% renewable energy, like everything with solar, wind, hydropower on our grid, we'd be 25% of the way we need to be off fossil fuels. If you tie that in with electrification of everything, cars and homes, now you're at 70% of the way. So it is crucially important, right? We have gas furnaces, stoves, water heaters, dryers. And from a health standpoint, gas leaks, right? Gas leaks all the way from where you frack it out of the ground and process and store and transmission and distribution, and it leaks in your home a fair amount. Burning fossil fuels in buildings has significant negative indoor air quality impacts. Right now, the EPA does not regulate indoor air quality. They'll regulate outdoor air quality. You're in a factory town, right? And if the air quality gets too bad, there are regulations. Factory has to clean it up. But indoor air quality can be anywhere from 2 to 100 times worse than outdoor, and nobody's regulating that. And get this, homes with gas stoves have somewhere between 50 to 400% higher nitrogen dioxide emissions than homes with electric stoves. And that's stunning, and nobody knows this. And it matters. Health and nitrogen dioxide health impacts in children. In 2016, the EPA found a causal relationship between exposure to nitrogen dioxide and respiratory health effects, asthma, IQ, learning deficits, even cardiovascular issues. We know that people with lower income and people of color often face higher exposure in their lives, and residents living in counties with higher levels of long-term nitrogen dioxide were more likely to die of COVID-19. So we don't want gas in our homes. It's just not ideal. And there are ways to get off it. There are ways to electrify everything at the same time that we clean up the grid, because invariably our grid is not very clean right now, right? Our grid is still powered by coal, and DTE is not cleaning it up fast enough. But if it were 30 years ago, maybe we could have sequenced this a little bit better, right? Clean up the grid and then electrify everything. And then, I don't know, but now you can't, because there's no more time. The time crunch, the science is telling us, is pretty intense. So we're doing it all together, because if we wait for the grid to clean up, it's too late to just then begin to start electrifying our homes. So we start electrifying things and we put solar up so that we can start offsetting a lot of our dirty grid. And then we work hard at the same time, simultaneously, at cleaning up the grid. So there are heat pump versions of hot water heaters, geothermal, air source heat pumps. There's inductive ranges. We just changed to one of those. And even your dryer. So what is a heat pump? A heat pump, it basically, it's very, very efficient way to heat your home. It provides heating and cooling using the refrigeration cycle. So basically the way a air conditioner works is it pulls warm air out of your home and deposits it outside. Well, a heat pump reverses that in the winter and pulls warm air from the outside and deposits it inside. And that's even in very cold winters. There's warm air out there, which is a little startling, but yet there you have it. And heat pumps have improved a lot. They work in much colder climates now than they used to. If you want to learn more and do a deeper dive with people who know far more than I about heat pumps, we are having a heat pump workshop. This was basically due to community demand. Like, people want to know about this. I've been talking about these things at Solarize workshops for a year and a half, and now everyone really wants to know. So we've invited some really exciting speakers from RMI, which is the Rocky Mountain Institute. They're coming, and Meadowlark Builders. And then we have a question and answer panel with energy auditors and HVAC and Green Home Institute, Brett Little. If you know any of these people, good expert people to talk about heat pumps and answer all your questions. So it's pretty exciting. I'm excited. And you can find it on our website, a2gov.org sustainability. Just go to newsletters and events. It's in an events. It's May 12th at 7. So
I'm signed up. I did sign up.
Good. Yeah, you'll have a registration and then you'll get reminders. There's almost 200 people signed up for this right now, which we did not expect. We set it up as a meeting because we thought there'd be like 20. And then we were like, oh, it should have made it a webinar. It got big. So briefly, talking about solar now. So like I said, DTE's grid is not good, right? We know this. This is coal, and this is their maybe projected future of how they're going to clean up their grid, but it's still uncertain, and they haven't quite committed to it. And even if what they have committed to isn't fast enough for our first world country that has used way more than its share, we need to be leading this. We have the resources compared to so many others, and we need to be dropping that much more quickly. We know, so there's ways to get to renewables, right? We know we need to get renewables on the grid. We know we need to shut down power plants. We know that this is slow and difficult and necessary. And there are people working on this, I promise. We know we need community solar, right? Legislatively, we're not allowed to have it yet. There are bills just introduced in Lansing to get community solar. And we're waiting on legislation. And sometimes that moves at the pace of the glaciers. We know we need renewables on site. And this one we can do now. We can do it now while we're waiting for the other things to move. We can get solar on roofs. Roofs just sitting there doing nothing but looking beautiful and protecting us from rain. They can do so much more. They can just host solar. And there's a lot of arguments for on-site solar. There's the climate argument. It's immediately accessible. You can do it now. There's an efficiency argument, right? Because if you're generating power on your roof and it's going right into your home, you're not having any loss from distribution miles away from production. There's a resilience argument. If you pair your solar with battery storage, it can act as a backup generator, just like a gas generator would. So if the power goes out, you still have power. It's resilience. And the potential eventually, if we ever get community solar, that will unleash our ability to do microgridding. And then there's a financial argument. How many things can you actually invest in? Well, efficiency you can invest in and it will pay itself off depending on what the efficiency is. And that's what your auditor will tell you. And solar pays itself off. My gosh, John, you spent $7 a watt, and with the solarized group buy discounts, we're getting under $3 a watt now for solar. With this,
Yep.
sort
I
of-
want to add more.
yeah.
Got to build it up. Got a budget.
Sure. Good. So that'll pay itself off in like 10 or 11 or 12 years or something like that. And then it's gravy. Then you're just making money from the solar because your bills are less than they were. This speaks to it. Solar costs have dropped dramatically. And at the same time, the efficiency of the panels has really improved. So the panel, the same footprint, is really able to produce more energy from the sun. And this is DTE rates. Which are going in the opposite direction, right? So this top green line here, this is Michigan. This is all of the Midwest electricity rates. We are the worst in the Midwest, and we keep going up. DTE 2019, May of 2019, the MPSC approved an 8.96% increase in residential electricity rates from DTE. 2 months later, they came back and asked for another increase, and it was approved. And that was another 4.7. And now I think they're in rate cases again. It's just nonstop. Whereas if you financed solar, for example, if you want to do it that way, you're not going to offset all of your electricity costs for very complicated reasons, but you will significantly reduce them, and your payment on your solar will be flat. So as DTE goes up and up and up and up, your solar stays. You're not going to, that cost doesn't increase, and eventually it goes away. So what is the Solarize program? The Solarize program is a neighborhood-based, or I should say community-based, bulk buy solar program. And there are Solarize programs around all over the place, but they're different than what we've been doing here in Ann Arbor. I can't say that we came up with this really brilliant design and like thought it all through and then launched it. And it was more like we just did something and it seemed to work really well. And so we keep doing it. That's sort of how it went. But usually what a Solarized program is a city or nonprofit or an environmental group will enroll a whole bunch of people, and they will issue RFPs, or requests for proposals, right? And they will say, okay, give us your best cost. And then they enroll a bunch of people, and then that installer goes out and does all of the rooftop. And what ends up happening is, well, certainly the residents aren't choosing the installer, the city or whoever is, and it's usually a very large installer who can handle a very large capacity installation. And it goes well. I mean, it's pretty successful. Solarized campaigns work. But what we sort of stumbled into, largely because we didn't have the bandwidth to wrap our minds around doing something like that. So instead, we started it at my house. And I said, and Missy said, well, you're getting solar. Why don't you just invite a bunch of people over and see if your installer will give them a discount if they all go solar? And I said, what? And she said, yeah, let's just try it. I'm like, okay. She goes, I'll bring snacks. Okay. So I did. I talked to my installer. I said, what if we do this? And so he set up a tier of discounts. Okay, if you get this many people, I'll give everyone that much discount, and so forth. So I invited everybody I could think of. I stuck it on Nextdoor and Facebook, and I expected that there would be 2 or 3 people awkwardly sitting around my kitchen table trying not to make eye contact with the installer. It was going to be like that Tupperware party from hell, as I was convinced. But that is not what happened. What happened is 40 people showed up in my living room, and then 13 solar installations went up from that group. And I didn't know if that was good. Missy clearly thought, whoa, because apparently the city usually has about 30 installs a year. So she thought, well, either your friends are particularly interesting and special, or this is scalable. So let's try. So I said, okay, I quit my other job and I now do this. So basically, we look to community hosts that want to go solar. They gather neighbors, colleagues, friends. They choose an installer they want to work with within the program, who who have already agreed to the discounts. And we have a meeting and we talk about solar, and it gets everybody excited. And then people get estimates. They can get outside estimates from other installers if they want. And in the past little over a year, about a year and a half, we've gotten over 1.3 megawatts of new clean energy up in Ann Arbor area, on almost 200 roofs. And again, that, part of that, it was like 30 or so a year. So we're pretty excited about it. And I can't even tell you what this year is going to come up with. It's going to be bigger than last because, yeah, the interest has been magnificent. It's really fun. It's a fun kind of viral, not the COVID kind of viral. It's like once solar starts, it sort of like goes. I wanted to show you these pictures because these, I've been talking with the historic district a fair amount. They had me come talk to them about the Solarize program, and they shared these pictures with me from some of the historic district properties where they have had solar installs. So this, I'm very, very proud and impressed to live in a place where the historic district is passionately, um, concerned about and excited about preserving the character of these homes, and is progressive enough to be able to kind of see that sustainability does not have to be sacrificed, right? So they gave me these pictures. These are some of the historic district homes that have had solar panels. They have some extra rules, like all black panels, no silver, that kind of thing. John would know probably a lot more of the rules, but basically they have to look good. They can't be patchy installations. Like on this one, you couldn't have like 3 here, maybe 2 there, and then like 1 over there. They want to be contiguous and look nice. These are 2 more in the historic district, I believe, homes with, so I think that their goal is, what they want is for you to see the home first and then maybe the solar panels second. This is a home on Gott Street that I did in the Solarize program. I didn't do it. It was part of the Solarize program. But it has that same sort of, historic kind of feel. And I used to live right near you, John and Gott. I used to live on Sunset and Fountain, that big old Tudor, where I don't even know where you to put solar panels, because between the trees and the roof pitches and anyway, and we lived there for 13 years in Waterhill. Had to move because my husband couldn't do the stairs anymore for medical reasons. So we moved to our house up more close to the river. This is nothing historic about this house, 1969. So, but that's my solar on my house. So it can look, I love the way solar looks, but I'm totally biased. So basically the big picture is that it can be completely overwhelming when you think about all these things that need to be done ultimately for our children and our grandchildren, because that's the way I think about it. I'm not really doing this for me at all. At this point, I'm doing it for my children and maybe someday my grandchildren. They're teenagers right now, my kids. But it doesn't all have to be done all at once, right? You don't have to just gut your house unless you have nothing to do and you want a really big project and you got some cash laying around. You think, why not? But if you're not that person, it's a making the right decisions along the way, right? So if you're starting with an audit and you're tightening up your envelope, right? And you're watching your water heater because you think in about 5 years that thing's going to go. And so you start researching heat pump water heaters now before you're in an emergency situation with no hot water, so that you know what you're going to do when it's time to replace your hot water heater. Same thing with your furnace. If you wait until your furnace goes, you're not going to want to now start looking at what alternatives do I have, right? And so you just make the right decisions along the way as you're doing upgrades to your home. From a financial standpoint, electricity costs more from DTE than gas. So those electric appliances will cost more to run. They're higher end appliances. They are much more efficient and use less energy. It's just that electricity is more expensive than gas. But if you do that nice efficiency work and right size your heat pump, and maybe throw on your solar panels, that really can sort of cut down and make it more doable. And then if you want to throw in what we consider the social cost of carbon, that's the cost of not doing anything, which all of us are paying for and all of our children are paying for. Then, of course, that whole math thing changes quite a bit. So I have no idea how long I talked. Was that like 20 minutes? Was it way over 20 minutes? I don't know.
It was a little bit, it was really good because both of you speak with very great conviction and passion for the subject. So I find that in itself easy to listen to. I don't know who has questions first, but I think that there may be some. I have one question, and I don't know who it would be too. Is there I don't know what you would call it, like a degradation over time of the performance of the solar panels so that they don't generate as much electricity, or they gradually lose efficiency? Nothing to do with the battery storage, but the actual generation over time. Do they diminish?
Yep, they do, but it's really small. So I think they lose, the current ones that are coming out lose approximately 0.5% a year, something like that, that they reduce. What's that, John?
Yeah, and then they start plateauing, and so that it becomes 0.25% per year after 10 years, and then it plateaus again, and so it's very small.
You can have 40 or 50-year-old panels up there still cranking out energy. They just sit there, you know.
What we're actually seeing, Eileen, is projects from 20 years ago that put panels up, and they're renovating again or doing something with their building. They're actually saying, hey, these are only 175 watt panels. We want to get 350 watt panels. And they'll sell the old ones because they're still perfectly good, and then buy new ones because they have limited space, and it increases their output more than by, almost twice over. So it's amazing that they still have a marketplace for old ones.
It's true. The inverters will have to be changed.
Yeah,
and
the inverters. Yeah.
But the panels themselves, the inverter is what takes, so that the panel collects direct current from the sun, corrects sun energy and makes direct current DC, and your home uses AC, alternating current, when you plug things in. So the inverter is a thing that switches the electricity from DC to AC, and those have a lifespan and warranties. So you want to look at warranties of your inverter, warranties of, solar, all that kind of stuff when you're purchasing.
Eileen? Yeah, just first of all, thank you so very much to both of you. Actually, I'm feeling quite overwhelmed because of all the information that you're provided. And the first feeling is, well, gosh, where do you start? But actually, my question was more about, who do you find to do this kind of work? I mean, essentially, reglazing windows and doors is not very exciting work, And so, and I know that we recently looked at painters coming in who did some reglazing work, but to get them is going to take about a year because all the good painters are sort of all booked. So what kind of worker or craftsman does this kind of work?
Eileen, do you want to take it?
Okay. Do either one of you want to add?
Yeah, so
add,
there's
John?
certainly answers towards preservation, and then there's answers towards the solar stuff and the energy stuff. And they certainly have different kind of groups of people that you pull from. As I mentioned, Lori Sipes did this for a long time, and she's retired. She had her own network of people now that loosely did it, and I still don't know where they are, if they're still doing it. but I know that there are now a network of home window wood repair people nationwide. They made up their own little network of people that do it. So I don't know if there's anybody in the Southeast Michigan nowadays, but there might be. I just haven't
There
tapped them.
are. And Chris, did you want to answer that too?
Yeah, there is a website and a Facebook page by Christopher Hewitt, who lives here in Ann Arbor. He lives on the Old West Side.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And they exchange all sorts of information. You can go either to the Facebook page. It's called My Old House Fix.
Mm.
And there's always a huge exchange of information. People say, do you know where I can get blah, blah, blah. And his web page is still in process, but it is addressing these energy issues, not just cosmetic issues with old houses, but also infrastructure issues with old houses. So I really love supporting a local person who's trying to put together this kind of clearinghouse of information. And it's also very entertaining and very affirming to be on a Facebook page where people are happy and positive.
So what was the name of it again, Chris? I didn't make a note.
They're both called the same thing, My Old House Fix,
Okay.
F-I-X. And it's done by Christopher Hewitt.
Mhm.
That sounds great.
Yeah, he's on the Old West Side, and it's become it's kind of like next door, but it's for people who have old houses,
Nice.
and they're exchanging all sorts of information. So
So I also have a recommendation. There is an auditor in town. He's an Ann Arbor auditor called Pro Energy Solutions. Do you know him, John? Doug King?
Nope.
He's very good. He's very thorough, and he only does that. And the thing that's nice about Doug King is that he comes in, goes 3 hours throughout your house, like every corner, everything, and then sends you a report with everything he would recommend, and like in order, right? This is their biggest problem. This is the biggest bang for your buck. This, like, if you want to do all the things, this is at the bottom of the list. And he will give you individuals who he likes to do the work. Then here's the other thing: for the same, no more cost, if you do the work within a year, he will come back at the end of the year and reevaluate your home for no additional cost. What he's created is kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like the folks that are doing the work know that he comes back. Okay, accountability, that's the word I'm looking for. So, and they want to stay with him because he's giving them business. So whatever like little ingenious thing he just did with that little business mind of his, I think it's pretty clever, so he does an energy audit. He gives you a list of stuff. He gives you a list of people who might do some of the work, and then he comes back. So
Mhm. It's
Yeah,
great.
and-
Janet, Janet, did you want to ask a question?
No, not a question, just another resource. The Michigan Historic Preservation Network for more than 20 years has done an historic resource directory. It's just come out for 2021, and it includes resources all over the state, not necessarily focused on windows, but there are plenty of window people included in that. And if you make one call, they normally can tune you into half a dozen people who are not in the directory. We wish that they all were, but that is an excellent resource. It's online, it's free to you, and you can also request a hard copy if you want to carry one around.
that's another good reason for joining the Michigan Historic
Yeah.
Preservation Network, because they're
Right.
just such a wonderful state resource, and they are doing so much good work throughout the state.
Right. We also had an excellent session on the installation of solar in historic districts at last year's conference. That's not on YouTube now. It was offered through December for people who had registered, but I'm pretty certain that we're going to pull that one up because it was so popular. I was quite intrigued by Julie. One of the examples that you gave showed the very monochromatic dark glass installation, but it had vertical seams like a standing seam roof. I was quite intrigued by that because it was evocative of a standing seam metal roof. And I was also aware that most of the installations are raised off the historic materials so that they can be removed or swapped without damaging the original fabric of the historic buildings.
You want to comment on that, Julie?
True. And standing seam metal roofs, actually, installers love installing on those because they're easy. You just clip them on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I talked with Dan Ezekiel, who obviously, and it was very strongly suggesting that I contact Julie and John about speaking to us. He wasn't available anyway, but I've known Dan Ezekiel for a long time. And he is one of the people that bought into one of those, that first, maybe that was the one you were talking about. He was one of the 13 people that ended up
I think
installing.
he was like in the second one, but yeah,
Yeah, I
he
think he was.
really in there. Yep.
And he lives on 4th Street. I always forget the street. 4th Street in the historic district, West Side Historic District. And he gave me some of his insights. And I think that probably it might be good if you keep a list so that people who want to talk to somebody who's done it before might be able to pass that along. I mean, it was easy for me to talk to Dan because I knew him and I got little bits of information. And then I saw on next door, I think it was John Barry, who lives in the Crescents somewhere.
Pied Piper of solar. I don't.
Yeah, and so he's somebody that some of us may also know. He's recruiting people to participate so they get this group discount. So it's an intriguing buy-in of a group. Now you have to go with the contractor that is doing the work, but you do get that discount. And I think that with time, you're going to get more accountability for the work, and you're going to have more feedback from people who have done the work to know what to complain about and what to do ensure accountability so that it's done right.
Mhm.
Eileen, if I could make one other comment, and that is if you have a tradesperson, a craftsperson, an installer, a professional you like, plug them into the Michigan Historic Preservation Network so that they get in the directory, because that really boosts your exposure to people all over the state. And it's very inexpensive. I mean, we don't make any money off the directory. It's just dollars to get listed.
Yeah, I'm just talking about how people are getting the buy-in so that they all get that group development price. It's not like individuals are going off looking for the contractor or being able to literally recommend the contractor. It's really learning from the experience that is getting passed along. So it's a little different than finding your own contractor.
It's fun too because people all come into a group setting to learn together.
It's like
And
co-housing. It reminds me of co-housing because I went to some of those co-housing meetings, and that's basically what you're doing. You're not really talking about finding the right craftsman for the project. You're finding the right package that ensures that everyone benefits.
Nice. It's nice.
Lisa has something to say.
Okay, I do see.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment and ask a question. So my comment is, John, thanks so much for your presentation. And I am completely inspired. I have a split level home and the basement is freezing and I don't like the floor. So you've just given me, like, I wouldn't rip it up for cosmetic reasons, but the idea of radiant heat, water radiant heat down there might make a lot of sense. So
It's magical.
that is just wonderful to hear. And I mean, I'm in my study now. I'm down here. I have a little electric heater in the corner, which is almost always on because I'm always so
Yeah.
cold down here. And so Julie, I wanted to ask a question. And by the way, we've had solar on our home for, I think 10 or 11 years. It was before the Solarize program, which makes me sad, but nonetheless, how much can we reduce our carbon footprint by installing solar everywhere possible in Ann Arbor, on all roofs possible, in all sites possible?
Oh, that's a great question, Lisa. I'm gonna have to, Thea will know that. Thea, she's
Yeah.
my little analyst person with all the numbers, and I
Yeah.
don't want to give you the wrong number.
Yes.
I know that we have a working draft renewable energy strategy in the office. It hasn't been published yet because we're on like draft 7 because we keep updating it and changing it. It's growing and it's learning as we learn. And I know that the renewable energy draft strategy has a targeted number of kilowatts or megawatts of rooftop solar, residential, commercial, industrial, landfill, like that we're going to build.
Mhm.
And I'm going to get it wrong. I want to say it would cover like 12% of our usage. I think that's 12% of our usage, assuming a bunch of electrification also happens. I'm not sure. I don't want to give you the wrong numbers, but there is a number.
Yeah, and I think I had heard that it's something, but we don't get anywhere near to where we need to be without doing the buying into projects elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
Cool.
We don't
Thank
have the space, like we don't have the physical space to do it, but we have a physical space to do a lot of it.
Yes.
And it's dispersed. There's something really powerful, both from, I think, a hard and fast fact powerful, and also sort of a soft skills community building powerful, to be generating your own energy in Ann Arbor, to walk all over Ann Arbor and see solar, 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 and know that this is who we are. This is what we're doing. And every time that we do it here in our footprint, like I said, there's an efficiency factor here where it's not then traveling like 50 miles to wherever. We're not losing any of it. It's very efficient. And then there's a resilience factor because more and more people are getting storage. And now you're looking at resilience hubs in neighborhoods. You're looking at resilience hubs and hopefully maybe, someday microgrids, if we can ever get legislation to approve that sort of thing. So I see this as a building block. It's not like the larger chunk of what we have to do outside of Ann Arbor. But it's there are so many reasons for it above and beyond the amount of renewable energy that it generates. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
John Ellison had his hand up. Do you have a question, John?
Kind of a couple. I know this was mentioned quickly, and maybe Chris knows or somebody. Are we in the district we're in? Are we allowed to have this or not? Solar panels in that
Yes.
historic? Yeah. Okay. And
The
then the second.
HTC has approved, so you have to take the project to the HTC, right, John?
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next thing is, Chris knows my roof. I have huge roof line on my house that exposes to sun, of those who know my house. But the architects know what this special roof's called. My roof is on a curved bias across the back of it. Will this work on a roof that's not completely flat, that's in a curved status? It's like that famous church in France where the roof is on a torque. Yeah. And how much of this could I have? Even if I did the whole block, would that be too much solar and I would be making too much electricity? Is there a limit of how much you can do? Because my roof line it's like huge square footage.
So
Thanks.
yeah, those are great questions. I'll get to the easier one first, which is how much. So right now, DTE will only approve the amount of solar on your roof that is the equivalent of what you've used over a year.
Mhm.
If they will not approve more than that, because as soon as they approve more than that, then they think you're like a little utility. And
it's
you're
kind of annoying.
it's kind of annoying.
It
Oh my
is,
God.
especially because as you move from no teenagers to teenagers, your energy use changes dramatically.
I know.
But because in Hawaii,
And your
in Ha-
cars, if you get an electric car, that changes dramatically.
Well, and you
Well-
can, if your life changes and you add an electric vehicle or you electrify your furnace, they will come back and allow you to add panels. So what I recommend for people to do is get what you can get. And then if you have room, plan for potential of expansion. The other thing that I did personally is I got solar before I'm doing deep efficiency, which is backwards from what a lot of people tell you. Let's say do efficiency and then you don't need as much solar. But I know I'm electrifying. So I just got as much solar as I possibly could. Then I'll work on reducing my need. And I already bought my electric vehicle. It's all kind of a process, right? So, but to the question about your crazy roof, I have no idea. And the best people to look at it would be solar installers. And they would, get a good one or two really good solar installers out there to just take a look at it. And then you'd have to see whether, if you're in the historic district, what they would say about the design, because they'll do a design, and they'll lay it out, and you'd have to see if it was doable.
Yeah, and likely, John, it would really depend on the standoffs from the roof. You'd probably have to have different changes in standoff dimensions. And then how much of in terms of the historic preservation component and the commission, we would have to look at it based on how or what impact it might have on the character defining features of the house. So if the roof is kind of a character defining feature, then we would probably be a little more strict on what you're covering with those panels.
So if I can interrupt just for a second, our meeting is scheduled to go to 9 o'clock. And we do need to spend a little bit of time on business. And I know Lars is on pins and needles because he's unsure about whether he's going to make it as a treasurer or not. After a very contentious campaign with a lot of social media, I don't know how you've lasted. At any rate, I think we will have to we want to thank John and Julie for this and thank you, Eileen, for arranging this. It's absolutely a wonderful presentation.
It's a great presentation. Before you leave, I just want to make an announcement for everyone, not just Old Fourth Ward people, and that is Elaine John's memorial service is on Saturday, May 22nd at 11 o'clock at the Dixboro United Methodist Church. It's going to be outside on the green. Bring your own chair and your own umbrella. I think most of you knew Elaine. She was the owner of the Treasure Mart, and the loss of the Treasure Mart has left a big hole in our neighborhood, in our community, and in our hearts. And her memorial service is once again Saturday, May 22nd, 11 o'clock in the morning at Dixboro United Methodist Church. So it's a huge loss for all of us.
Thank you, Chris. I do want to mention, Julie, before you cut off, that Ron Suarez made a really interesting post about a project he's working on with St. Thomas Church. Ron, could you make just a few, are you still there?
He's muted, but he's there.
He may be away from his.
Yeah. We can get
Okay,
back to
well, Julie, if you haven't talked to Ron before about this particular issue, you should
Definitely
do it at some point. But John and Julie, you're welcome to stay for the very exciting business part of our meeting.
I think I will beg off.
Okay, all right.
I'm honored to be here, and what a great group of people. And it's so fun to see names and people that I know. Ann Bannister, so fun to see you. And Ollie, I only see your name. And Lisa, of course, always great to see you. And I see people's names I know, and I don't even know why I know them. I don't know if it's just a small town or I'm just like reading too many articles or something, but you all seem very familiar to me. So anyway,
They make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
going
so-
to.
Thank you so much. Maybe I'll see some of you next Wednesday.
And I
Yeah,
hope we
perfect.
see you all next year. We hope to have a downtown neighbors party again next year. So, God willing.
Bye, all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go put some kids to bed. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye,
And I do,
David.
I
Thank you.
do, I
Thanks,
do want to
John, Julie.
acknowledge that Peter Osler has joined our meeting, so we appreciate that. So Chris, we have a few, I guess the next item on the agenda is Eleanor briefly discussing the newsletter.
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot to discuss. We have hard copies now. If anyone wants them, get in touch with Jeff or me and we'll send you one. And it grows like topsy, it seems. Every time we do one, it gets bigger. And the one thing that I would like to say is, please, if anyone has any topics they would like to see covered in the newsletter and don't want to do it yourself, let us know. If you do want to do it yourself, give us a proposal for putting in anything that you find interesting. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is happening in this neighborhood right now. It can be something that would just be interesting to the residents and other interested people. So any contributions we would be delighted to get.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eleanor.
So the next item on our agenda is the treasurer election. Lars, I know it's been a very difficult fight for you, but would you like to say a few words?
We
Need
can't
to
hear
unmute
you.
yourself.
No, he doesn't want to.
Yeah. I'm honored to be considered for this very prestigious position. Not to mention how remunerative it potentially can be.
I want to add that he was formerly the treasurer for the Southeast Michigan Jazz Association, and he is now president of that group, but he still does some of the treasurer work too. So he has, he has good credentials for this job.
And I do want to thank David Kennedy because he has been very helpful in the transition with setting up the Square account and everything else. So we greatly appreciate your help.
Thanks.
Thanks,
So
David.
in regards to the treasurer's election, does anyone object to Lars being the treasurer?
For that comment, I don't know.
Seeing no objection. Lars,
This
you
is
are
like
now.
This is like the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the U.S.
Thank you, Lars, for taking on this responsibility. And Chris, you have a few announcements before we close.
Needless to say, we will not have the Downtown Neighbors Party again this year. We hope this is the last time we have to make that kind of announcement. The last time we had the party, which is now 2 years ago, we had about 300 people there from all over Ann Arbor. So we hope to resume that. We hope by next spring, we will once again be having the Downtown Neighbors Party. And also, I just wanted to say, I went to a neighborhood leaders meeting with Galen Hardy, a meeting about sustainability about 2 months ago. And I was able to report a lot of things about our neighborhood because we already do a lot in working with the influx of neighbors we have every year. We have a 95% turnover of our neighborhood every year. And we do a lot to make sure that our new neighbors are informed about things like recycling and composting and trash days. And that's a big part of being custodians of the environment. I told you all about the 10,000 tree program, and John Beeson talked about removing an evergreen tree from his property because they don't need shade in the winter. And one of the misgivings I have about the 10,000 tree program is I understand that the trees that are available are all evergreens. And most of us want deciduous trees. So we have that canopy to cool our houses in the summer and no leaves so we can get the sunlight in the winter. So Lisa, maybe you can do something to communicate that to the city. It's a good program, but a lot of us need deciduous trees rather than evergreen trees. And also I did tell that group of neighborhood leaders that a problem we have in our neighborhood is, since most of the properties are owned by absentee landlords, they really don't take care of bushes or trees or plants or flowers or anything. And it gets discouraging that things are not, they're not fertilized, they're not maintained, they're not trimmed when necessary. And that's a real tough one. I don't know how we can crack that nut, but they seem just to collect the rent and, forget what happens with the trees and plantings. There's so much that we can do with those to help maintain the environment, but getting through to the absentee landlords is a huge challenge. It's really a huge challenge. There was one incident where we did ask a landlord, could you please do some landscaping? He did, and he didn't do anything to maintain it. And within a year, everything was dead. So not sure what to do. Maybe Lisa, you could come up with some ideas on how we can, we have an increasing number of absentee landlords here in Ann Arbor. How can we make them also custodians of the environment? So
Lisa,
I also want to thank Bethany Osborne. We have a wonderful new treasurer in Lars, and we're so grateful to Lars for that. And we're very grateful for all the work that Bethany put in for years. She's moving to Kalamazoo, and we hope that she will join us from time to time, but she was an excellent treasurer for years and really took care of things. Our biggest bills have to do with the newsletter. In fact, our only bills have to do with the newsletter and the Downtown Neighbors Party. So what we collect in dues and donations, we turn that all back to the community. For us, it's all about doing what we can to support the community. So, but still, it's a job that takes time, and we're very appreciative to her.
Lisa, before I know you probably have to leave. I don't see how you do it. You're exhausted. You and Ann from the council years. I don't see how you've been able to stay up all these hours and focus. I have no idea.
I fall asleep during the council.
I have no idea. Is there anything you would like from us? Because I know we come to you, but is there anything you would like from us?
I can't think of a thing, but I would like you to, I really appreciate this tip about deciduous trees. And I will speak would probably be Mr. Delacourt about what to do about absentee landlords who aren't caring for their trees, or I suppose they're mowing their grass, but you're sort of saying the larger kinds of things aren't getting done. They're not keeping up their landscaping and bushes, stuff like that.
Yeah, they pretty much, they'll have somebody who comes by with a huge machine and mows whatever is on the lawn, but we could use some more trees in the neighborhood, but you need to care for them. And we've lived here for 40 years. I rarely see a landlord caring for trees.
Yeah.
So before I go to Tom had his hand raised, and you did have your hand raised at one point. Did you want to say anything? No. Okay.
Tom Stolber, yeah.
So I was going to answer a question about the trees. And so it has to do with the insects that we're getting this year is one of the reasons. And that they don't like to eat the evergreens as much as they like the deciduous trees. So that was one of the reasons. And you can plant them on the north side of your property, evergreens. So it helps in terms of like a cold windbreak in the winter. But you're right, deciduous would be more preferable on a regular basis.
Well,
So Tom, are you saying that that was why the city chose evergreens and you don't think they're going to give anybody deciduous? Or were you just?
This year, they're not. It's all evergreens. And I believe that was one of the reasons. I don't know if it's the only reason.
Oh, great. Okay, that's helpful to know. So I won't follow up with that.
Okay.
The answer will be no.
Chris, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about on your list?
Don't forget about the heat pump workshop on May 12th at 7 p.m. And next week is the Michigan Historic Preservation Network Conference. It's May 11th through 14th. It's a virtual conference, lots of wonderful sessions. Jeff and I are going, and probably Eileen will be there, Norm will be there.
Yep.
And Janet will be there. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, you can come and go. I know I did before I checked to see that there is nothing in direct conflict with the heat pump workshop, which is Wednesday evening. So there are lots of times that because it's virtual, the constraints are very different. It's not like you have a captive audience and you're in Holland, Michigan for 3 days. But so there's a little bit of flexibility on how you join the sessions. And I've got
it's nice though, because
them all marked.
Home. So,
yeah, that's what I say. But when you register, you can, it was easier to do it from the paper copy, but then you can mark, and so you can remind yourself when you need to join in.
Thank you, Anne. You have your hand raised.
Well, I thought of what it was. On the Squarespace, do we prefer that dues are paid through Squarespace, or would you actually prefer an old paper check?
Actually, slipping me $100 bill in the alley downtown would be the best. No, Square would be the best. It would be the easiest as opposed to check. You could do it online. It's a lot easier that way.
That's okay, that's easier for me too, I thought.
Yeah.
And then the other one I wanted to offer was that Julie Roth might not have did, I don't think she mentioned that if we all as a group go with one solar provider, that's how we get the group discount.
Yeah, you don't get to choose the provider. You join in as a group, like co-housing, frankly. You join in as a group of minimum of 10. They had 13 in that one that she described. And then you all benefit from that bulk purchase. And you can negotiate nuances like whether you want the battery or not. I think there are a few other things. If it's not in a historic district, you may have more latitude on approvals and the kind of glass, but the installer brings in the subcontractors, and most of all the work is done under this group contract in order to get the discount. It's like a scale up. You're getting a quantity of scale.
Thank you, Julie.
Julie?
Unmute.
I just went to the A2Gov page that Julie Roth suggested, and I can't find events and newsletters and events on this page that she directed us to. Does anybody have a hint?
Which events are you talking about?
The heat pump workshop.
Oh, I wish I had copied it to my page. Let me see if I have it, because I did sign up, and I got it. I forgot it from something. So let me see. It came from Missy Stoltz, and I probably got it because I regularly attend all the 820 events. I never looked for it on you didn't find it on 820?
Well, I went to a20.gov/sustainability, and then she had / newsletters and events, but there's nothing newsletters and events that I can find on this page unless I'm overlooking it.
So are you interested in
It's on the left. It's on the left.
Yeah.
On the left.
If you go to Sustainability and Innovations homepage.
That's the page I'm on.
Yeah. So then on the left, there's carbon neutrality, about adaptation and resilience, newsletter and events.
I am not seeing
Okay,
the
so,
left sidebar at all.
okay, I don't know why that wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just the city website. It shows up differently every computer that you look at it on. I have no sidebars on this page.
All right, well, I'm gonna put in the chat the newsletter and events link.
Oh, thank you so much.
And
Great.
Peter Osler, I don't know if you're still listening, but could you please unmute yourself and tell some of the people here a little bit about yourself?
Oh dear, why me?
I'm gonna sign off, folks. Take
Thanks,
care.
Lisa.
Yeah, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Lisa. Thank you for coming.
Oh, Peter, we all did it at the beginning and you missed that. So now you're on the spot.
Yeah, I did want to mention that Betsy Williams, my better 3/4, is sitting beside me. So it's not, we're just looking at my phone. So we're both here.
Okay.
I'll put
And
your
we're-
name on the list.
We're in a car and I don't have any clothes on, so I don't
You know, I
my
think
picture.
I'm gonna, this was a recorded event, but Peter, I think I will delete that last bit of information.
Oh, no, you have to leave that in.
Well, Jeff, what were you looking for me? Like who I am?
No, just, we've identified ourselves so that people, you know, who didn't know you, but actually everyone knows you here.
Yeah, all the people who don't know him have left.
So
no, and I'm really excited that we were a little. I apologize that we were a little bit late joining, but we enjoyed everything that was introduced and the comments and the questions. And Chris, kudos to you, brava, for bringing up the issue of the evergreen trees. I checked in with that program and was surprised that everything was an evergreen. The person that I spoke to didn't mention the issue with the insects, but he did say that there would be some deciduous trees being offered in the future. So I don't know how, that he said they'd be doing this again, that kind of program. So I think maybe we can look forward to that in the future, but I getting that word to Lisa was great.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think we're about done. And I just, to John, I hope your mom's doing okay. And we'll look forward to seeing you in mid-June.
Mom's doing just great at 93. So everything's cool down here. It's just interesting to compare, just for one note, there's buildings down here, back to historic preservation. The Kellogg Mansion, which was Kellogg Cereal, which is just north of here. The man that just bought it doesn't like it and is going to tear it down to put his new house. He paid $5 million for it and is going to tear it down because there's such a shortage of waterfront property in the multi-million-dollar levels in Florida right now. And it has Peter Max floors in one room from the 60s, and it's a really quirky house. And they're not even sure if they're going to be able to even salvage anything inside or the furniture.
Oh.
And the woman that owns it, because her husband died, needs the money so bad that she begged the city council not to make it historic, not to preserve it, because she needs the sale so bad. So we're driving by it tomorrow to look at it because May 15th is the closing. So just to let you know, it's different worlds and different places in this country right now.
So what city are you in?
Well, I'm in Largo, Florida, but that house is in Dunedin, just north.
Dunedin. I know where Dunedin is.
Yeah, Dunedin. It's like a little Ann Arbor. It's all little restaurants on a little street, and it's very cool to walk around. These fancy homes are along the water from 1925, but the high rises are coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for.
I think
Jeff, I'll get my notes to you.
Thank you.
Possibly later tonight. You can either reformat or edit. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Great job. Thanks to all.
Thank you, Eileen, so
Hey,
much.
thanks,
It was
everybody.
wonderful.
Good to see
Thank
you all.
you, everybody.
It was very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take care.
Great
Good
meeting,
night.
Eileen. Thank
Great
you.
program.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
Diane.
everybody.